So good afternoon, everyone. I suppose it's a second slide, but it's fine. So let's start. So I'm Clerens, Secretary General of EASE, the European Association for Storage of Energy. And I think the introduction made very clear how much a changing system with more renewables will need more flexibility and also more storage in the system. EASE is a European association of different companies. We have component suppliers, equipment suppliers. We do have utilities, distribution system operators, transmission system operators. We have the whole chain, which is represented in EASE. So it's an association not only looking at a little part of the system, it's really looking at the whole chain on storage. When you look in the different parts of storage, what is storage and what are the different applications, you see that the power system needs a lot of parts. We heard there is the generation, the transmission and the distribution, but there's also the storage part as a part of the energy system more and more active. And in this power system, you see that demand-side management is very often storage, heat storage, cold storage, but it's not very often that you really cut it off if you can avoid it. And then you have the sector coupling, which is helping that you get renewable energy into heating and cooling, renewable energy into transport. In Europe, we have roughly 50% of the energy consumed for heating and cooling the buildings. Half of it, roughly, of our energy. So if you can get renewable energy into this heating and cooling, you have a very good way to decarbonize heating and cooling, which is the aim in Europe. And the important part is not only batteries and battery storage. This is what's happening in Europe. This is already 2 years ago, 3 years ago in Germany. You have 85% of the whole generation capacity which was used came from renewable energy sources, which means that only 15% was synchronous generation, were rotating masses in the system. All the rest was power electronics, and the light stayed on. Nothing happened to the system. And this is thanks to the flexibility, to the connection, to the storage parts in it. And we get there more and more. If you look what will happen in the system of the future, we want to go to a decarbonized society. The Paris Agreement says by 2050 we want to be decarbonized. We're net zero. Europe is discussing to make it a law to be net zero by 2050, a binding law to be net zero by 2050. And if we go there, we see this. This is Spain with 70 gigawatt of peak demand. Roughly 10 times, 9 times, 10 times daily here. And this is what will be the generation and the shifting. You will have to shift the part 345 gigawatt hours is what you will have to shift around over day. Every day. You shift it from the peak to the night. Every day. And these are not small quantities. This is really a lot of energy. And if you really want to decarbonize the system, then you need to have other technologies. I gave the number. End of this year, it's expected to be 174 gigawatt hours, which we can produce in batteries. So we could not even balance with the possible production today the Spanish needs. It's not batteries who can solve it alone. They are part of the solution, but not the only solution. And when you look further, the wind and the sun is shining more, the sun more in the summer, and the wind is more when there's a temperature difference in the air. So you need to shift seasons. For several months you need to shift energy, not only for some days or in one day. And there you talk about other technologies. So it's really, this time you shift 72 times the energy needs over seasons, then you shift it over the day. 72 times. You cannot solve this with batteries alone. That's why we say that you need, on grid scale storage, in this case, to shift it around different technologies. And in there, the technologies which you see, and I want to show you for the seasonal storage, you have power to gas, or you have pumped hydro, compressed air, liquefied air, but also batteries for the real time, for the shorter time. And this playing together of technologies is really what we do. We defined energy storage in 5 families. You will not be asked before you leave if you know them by heart, but You have 5 families here. And every family has an added value compared to the others. The chemical is what I said before, hydrogen. The electrochemical is what is seen here, all the batteries. But also the electrical storage with capacitors and supercapacitors, and I have some examples how it's used. The mechanical is the pumped hydro, and we have quite some in India, some hydro and also pumped hydro. And then the thermal storage, which is the cheapest if you want to shift it from the warm to the cold period, which is mainly needed in Europe, but also for some months in India. And then when you look at the applications, I was very happy to hear before from the speakers that the power quality is one of the big challenges if you move to a renewable powered grid. The harmonics is something people don't really understand. We already have problems to understand reactive power. So if we now need to understand all the impact the others, the light bulbs gives and everything, it's really more difficult. So there's a lot of applications which energy storage can do. And we had heard before that if you want to have electric vehicle charging, you need to reinforce the distribution system grid. You cannot rip open all the lines and replace them with 3 times as big ones. You need to enforce it that they have the local feeders enforced and supported by storage, and mainly in this case it will be battery storage, to charge over the moment when it's not needed and to discharge when the peak is happening. And all these services need therefore to be remunerated. And in Europe we see, and I don't know where this went forward, in Europe we see that these services are not all remunerated. So we need to create products who can really remunerate these different services. If you want to avoid curtailment, you need to have a TSO tendering a product for curtailment minimization. And then you store it and bring it back later. If you have the services about the power quality, you need to tender and you have a service you can bid into power quality. Because the storage devices need to stack the revenue streams. If you do not stack the revenue streams, you cannot make them economic. You need to have this working. We see that there are different opportunities in Europe. First of all, we see that more and more local flexibility markets are emerging. And the question is really, do we need to use the transmission system always to balance on a local scale? Having all the signals going to the transmission system, analyze, and then getting, oh, this PV needs to be shut down, or this charging point needs to be slowed down, or whatever. Do we need to do this? Or can we not solve it on the local level? And that's what we're discussing. More and more local flexibility markets, flexibility needs, and also cooperation on local level. And then we need to make sure that everyone who participates in the system needs to provide system services. Yesterday I mentioned, I don't think it's good that if someone uses the grid, it's not contributed to the cost of the grid. If you are islanding or having a small system which is using the grid only, I don't know, 10 days a year, these 10 days are very valuable for the person. You need to install the grid and maintain the lines the whole year for these 10 days. So it's not really economic to say you just pay by kilowatt hour for the 10 days you need it, and all the rest you don't contribute. It's the others who will pay for you. And in Europe, we are going away from the net metering, meaning that PV is put on the grid and you just get it out when you need it, because then you use the grid as a storage device for free. Is this something where you want to go? Someone else would have to pay. And very often the PVs are on the roofs of the ones who have houses, who are richer. But the electricity is consumed by everyone, also the poor ones. So is this the way we want to go? We want to subsidize from the ones who don't have the PV to the ones who have the PV? Is this the way we should go? So a lot of questions which are coming up in there. I gave you some examples to close, and I should then be hopefully in the times. 1 minute, that's perfect then. Here you see, this was in the UK, there was a services enhanced frequency reserve. And it was very fast reaction. You need to react in less than a second. In milliseconds, you need to provide the electricity you need. Because you have less rotating masses, the inertia of the grid is reducing, and therefore it's reacting way faster if something goes wrong. And this is done with batteries. In here, you see that you have in Portugal a lot of renewable generation. More than half of this is solar and wind in Portugal. And they use a lot of pump hydro and variable turbines, which can adapt very good to the needs. So you can upgrade the existing pump hydro plants to more efficient pump hydro plants. Then you have these lines in France, which is a virtual line. It's a transmission system operator who's building a line, or not building a line. And in this case, it's not building a line because it uses a storage device to replace the building of a line. So it provides the electricity needed in the peak time, which otherwise would have been provided by a second line. And since we see that the generation pattern is changing, which was not the case in the past. In the past, you had centralized plants. Now you have wind parks popping up, PV popping up. You're not sure if your line will be needed in 5 years or 10 years. The container, you can move it around, but you cannot move the line around. The line is there for 50 years or 100 years. I don't know how long it amortizes in 50 years. So there's a real question if it's not more economic to use it if you know that your generation patterns will change in a region to use these storage devices. And finally, I wanted to show you that also the ultracapacitors, which are basically an electrical storage, it's a very short storage, can increase a lot the fluctuations and the power qualities of the system. And if you couple this with other batteries, you have a combination of two technologies, one doing the very fast quality and very fast reaction, and the battery is putting more energy. So you can optimize even with different storage technologies. Basically, this is all I wanted to say. And in the Storage for a New campaign, which you find on our website, you find a lot of the other success stories where storage is there today. Thank you.